I've come to realize that some people enjoy my lighting techniques a lot, so in this video I'm going to show you how to do lighting like I do in 3 steps. Shadows and lighting, applying textures, and rendering. This is the reference that we are going to use, which is a screenshot from the show Amphibia that I am highly obsessed with at the moment. I do want to disclaim real quick, this is my first video, don't take my words seriously. So we start off with a base. I have separated all 3 objects into separate groups. So yeah, here I'm still separating the background into one group. I think this is easy, so you can apply multiply textures on top of the whole object without actually having to merge the layers. So what I'm doing here is I have planned out where the lighting is going to come from. So the sun is where the lighting will come from, and the arrows is just a helping mechanism, so you actually know where to put the shadows and where to actually put the highlights. So here I've started to actually work on the background first because I find that easier. And it's also not the point of focus, so to get that out of the way first, always the easiest, I find. So another reason why you should probably render your background first is so you start rendering your character and doing the lighting on your character, it doesn't really look out of place, since a lot of times if you tend to do the character first, fully render it, and then add in a background, it sometimes looks out of place. And you also have that if you do that the other way around. So if you were to first render your background fully and then add in a character, so I would highly recommend simultaneously sketching both background and character, so it doesn't really look out of place. And then if you've both sketched the background and the character and do your line art and fill in the base, you should start with the background so you actually know the environment before you start shading the character. So now I have started shading my character and we know where the lighting is coming from, and I have chosen for some warmer colors since the background is pretty warm. You see the house is pretty with red colors, so I decided to give her a pretty warm multiply layer. That's how I usually add my shadows, but you could also use something else, but I wouldn't recommend that. I would always just use a multiply color, but I would also recommend to really know what kind of color you're using, since in some environments blue multiply layer is probably the best choice, but if you want a warm environment, red multiply layer is best choice, and in some really weird cases it's purple. If you were to use a multiply layer, always just pick the color of your sky or pick the color of the environment. So like I did with the red house, it has a red roof, so I used a red multiply layer. If you have a completely blue sky as background, use that blue sky as the multiply layer. That's the best way to actually make your character look like they are in the environment. So what I am doing right now is I have added a soft light layer and I'm trying to recreate that reflective light, since you can see also on the house and in the bush in the background that it's a little green downside, since I have imagined that they are standing on grass, so the lighting would then fall on top of the grass and that grass would reflect that, which would then cause soft green lights to fall back on the character and on the house, which would kind of be like a second light source without actually having it be a light source, since it's actually coming from the main light source. So what I am doing right now is adding some subsurface scattering, which is basically when a light travels through a translucent surface. This is pretty hard to demonstrate with the lighting technique that I have chosen, and you can see that I am struggling a little bit with this. You often see this by the ear if lighting comes from behind, since the ear is the thinnest skin that's around at that time. It often travels through the skin and makes it look really pink and bright. You also often see this when it comes to fingers. If you place your hand on top of a really bright light, you can see the pink and white through your fingers, since skin is translucent. Honestly, the best way to actually practice subface surface scattering is to just use references. Don't do it like I do, I just winged it here. So now we are adding highlights, and I usually do this by inverting the multiply layer, so all the areas that haven't been affected by shadow are then lightened up. After all the spots that have been affected by shadow are lightened up, I also put a little bit of lighting on the face, since the face is the focus point and it makes the viewer's eye, it leads them to the face a little bit better. It also honestly just looks a bit better, and I like to do it a lot more. I usually use add for highlights or soft light if I want to. Right now what I'm doing, I am editing the background a little, since I like to use a little bit of blur in my art. It kind of defeats the purpose of using a lot of rendering in the background, but I honestly think it looks a little bit more photo realistic, and I like that. As you can see, I'm still playing around with the shadows a little bit since I wasn't completely happy with it yet. And honestly, it is just a real process. There isn't really a right way to do it often. It's a personal choice of what you actually do and how you edit it. I just really wanted the face to stand out, and I was having trouble with how to do that. And I was adding a little bit of lighting at some places, but it's honestly a hard process, and you should just do what looks good. I'm also editing the bits that are a bit translucent from the back, so it's like her cape and her hair. These are just bits that make it look a little bit more realistic, and I like adding those since they're small details, but they do matter a lot in the overall painting. So like just adding a little bit of highlight in the hair so it looks a bit realistic. I like that. I don't know, just do what you want. Well, we have arrived at part 2, adding some textures. Honestly, some people I've heard say that adding texture should be your first step, but I disagree with that since I really like planning out the lighting, since I find lighting the most important bit about the painting, and having that planned out first is much more important in my opinion. So I add some blush. Every texture you should honestly think about, like she has a fur coat on, so maybe add a little bit of that like furriness, and her chest piece is actually a type of crab shell, so that's also really interesting. But there isn't really a right way to do it. I honestly just pick a lot of pencil type of brushes and just honestly paint over it. And I am adding secondary shadows right now. These are not really cast shadows, but like just putting them in the darkest place. I don't actually know what the real name is, but these go under her chin. Like these are the darkest places that will come out of the lighting piece. These are just they add little details on the piece itself, and they really help bring the piece together. And I really like doing them, but they are really simple and easy to do, and you usually have this done within honestly minutes. The texturing bit is honestly the quickest thing to complete, since it's just about adding small details and just making it look a little bit more realistic. You don't need to apply textures all the time. It's honestly just stylistic choices at that point. It's really easy in my opinion, but it's also hard to combine with lighting and shadows. So normally I add textures actually when it comes to rendering. So now we have arrived at the last step, rendering. This is basically you are just adding little bits of details that make the piece look a lot better. These are more texture type of details, since you can see the fur coat now has a lot more of that really furry texture. And this honestly, when it comes to texturing, you should always do the base, but also the lighting and shadows. As I said, it's much more easy to do at the end. I'm also adding some more details at the hair, but line art, honestly, I don't like line art, and I usually include that in my rendering. So as you can see here, I'm making the lines look a little bit more big. These are, again, personal stylistic choices. You don't have to do this. I like doing this. You should also, when it comes to line art, I'm not very good at it, but I do know that the thicker the line, the bigger the shadow should be. So I usually add some bigger lines as shadows. Again, I am trying to improve her eyelashes, but it's so hard. And it's honestly just about making the piece look really good and finished. But if I would have to give one tip, it would be don't spend too much time rendering. Rendering is a small part you do at the end to add some details. Don't try to change the entire piece at the end, then you should just start over. And oh god, here I am trying to render the background. You do not have to do this. I like rendering backgrounds, and I was really trying. I'm adding stones here. I'm not really good when it comes to texturing backgrounds. I have noticed I really need to improve at that. But since we are going to blur the background, it isn't necessary to add this much detail, but these are really loose details that I know you don't see when it's blurred. So it makes the background look a little bit more detailed, but it's actually not. This is honestly the quickest way to do it. I spent not a lot of time on the background, and it looks mediocre if you look at it separately from the character, but when you actually blur it, it's really detailed and it looks like I spent a lot of time on it. It's honestly just a small life hack. As you can see now, I'm blurring it, and we've added the character back, and it looks like a really finished painting, even though it is not. And I'm also adding some dust particles, since I like doing that when it comes to blurred backgrounds, since the blurred background makes you want to put less blurry things in front of it, and it really stands out then. So the character really stands out, but those dust particles are much more apparent then. And now I'm just adding some of the last touches. These last little details can be honestly anything, maybe some small mistakes you've made and realized, but it's just about finishing it up. And here we can see the result, the base and the rendered version. I'm not that proud of how it turned out, but I am glad that I left out Sprig, which is the pink little frog that's beside her. I wasn't really good at that. I really hope that this tutorial was at least a little bit clear, because I am not the best teacher, I have to be honest. I know I'm pretty bad at explaining, but I really hope that I did explain everything well enough. If you like this video, then I really appreciate it if you were to subscribe. Also, if anyone really wants another type of tutorial about anything, I could always see and try and make another one. But thank you for watching. I really appreciate if you really stuck through the whole video. Bye!